Order. Order. Peter Bedford to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh, and it's a pleasure, as usual, to serve under your chairmanship. But before I begin, I would like to ask the House a simple question. Who truly understands the challenges and intricacies of local life in our constituencies? Is it civil servants sitting behind desks in Whitehall, or is it our constituents, the people who live, work and raise their families in the communities affected by local decisions? The obvious answer, which I hope this House will agree, is our constituents know best. And yet we find ourselves in a situation where the government appears determined to ignore those voices on local government reorganisation. Since these plans were announced, and since rumours of an extension to the City Council boundary in Leicester, I have led a campaign against it. I have tabled amendments to the English Devolution Bill, asked questions on the floor of the House, written to government ministers, and yet the response remains the same. The government simply does not want to listen to the people who will be most affected by any local government reorganisation. This is not to say that I am opposed to reforms. I recognise the potential benefits of consolidation, savings for the hard-pressed taxpayer, particularly at a time when this government continues to raise taxes to unprecedented levels, and the possibility of more efficient public services. But any changes must be done with communities, not to communities. Residents must have a voice, a say in which neighbourhood plan they fall under, who runs their local services, and crucially, how much council tax they will be asked to pay. That is why, if the Minister decides against opening a discussion on introduction of referendums today, I would like to not predetermine what she's going to say, but I will continue this campaign, and I'll be presenting a bill to the House of Commons to give members the opportunity to empower their residents with a final say on what local government reorganisation should look like in their own areas. Of course I'll give way.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I wonder if he shares my concerns that I completely agree with the principle that he's talking about, but we didn't have that opportunity in the last government when the Conservatives imposed local government reorganisation on places like North Yorkshire. Does he think that the party in the last government should have done exactly the same too?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I think a lot can be learnt from previous governments of all different colours in mistakes maybe that they've made in the past. So I would ask the Minister to look at history and not to repeat any mistakes that may have been made in the past. Local identity, democratic consent and keeping council tax low are all at the forefront of my constituents' concerns. Firstly, there is growing concern throughout villages such as Glenfield, Leicester Forest East, Birstall and many more that if they're absorbed into the City Council area, they will have development after development, quite literally, dumped on their green and beautiful spaces. These communities see their villages, currently served by Leicestershire County Council, coming under increased pressure from the City Council expansion. I'll give way.
Commend them for bringing this forward. Having been elected as a councillor back in 1985, in those days I had some hair, served some 26 years in the council. There's a special place in my heart for local government and the real benefit that local councils make to local decisions. But does the honourable member not agree that accessibility for the general public to the council must be protected at every level, and the removal of access to people in towns and villages by centralisation can never ever be an acceptable option?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I agree, absolutely agree. I mean, council services should all be accessible to all, and that is one of the concerns that my constituents have, particularly in rural areas, that if they are absorbed into a city unitary authority, they will have perhaps less access to be able to get their views and their thoughts across. So I absolutely share the sentiment that the Honourable Member has just expressed.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I'll give way.
Can I share with my honourable friend a cautionary tale, and that is that often reorganisation is promoted as delivering better value for money. But in fact, in Christchurch, when Christchurch was absorbed into the BCP council area, the consequence has been less efficiency and higher costs, even to the extent that BCP council is now applying to have a 7.5% increase in council tax this year without a referendum. But the history of the Christchurch one is that 84% of the people in a local referendum with a 60% turnout were against joining up with Bournemouth and Poole, and they were right. And the trouble was that the government then refuse to listen to the views of the local people.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I absolutely agree. I think, as I said to the honourable member for Harrogate earlier, I think this government should reflect on mistakes that previous governments of different colours have made and ensure that it's always local people and what they want is taken on board before any decisions are made, such as the case that my honourable friend has given. My constituents see development being pushed further and further outwards, right up to their boundaries, and they see local services stretched as a result. Take Glenfield, for example. It's becoming increasingly clear that the city mayor in Leicester, who recently declared a climate emergency, is looking to build over the much-loved Western Park golf course on the city-county boundary. Right now, residents' groups are able to lobby their local representatives, including me, and try to protect such spaces. But ultimately, we all know that if Glenfield is incorporated into the city boundary, then the residents' groups will have fewer and fewer avenues to defend the character of their community. I'll give way.
I want to thank my honourable friend from Mid Leicestershire for giving way and his leadership on this local government issue. I'm pleased that he's standing up for his community that hasn't been listened to. In Surrey, we have got local government organisation imposed on us, despite the fact 9 out of 11 boroughs and districts wanted 3 local councils. The government imposed 2. Does he agree that that was a mistake?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and as I said to honourable members that have intervened, I think this government should definitely learn from previous mistakes of previous governments, particularly in the example that he's given, where local government reform has been brought in against the wishes of local people and has actually resulted in adverse impact on their local services and communities. So I take his point, and I hope the Minister will listen to those. But I'm not raising these concerns because I'm an IMBY. I fully accept that housing is needed. But we cannot allow a situation to develop where overbearing mayors, like those in London, Birmingham or Leicester, are able to force their housing quotas onto the outer edges of their cities and gravely impact the lives of county communities. Secondly, after clear consternation from many in my constituency, is that they don't wish to be ruled by a city mayor that has little chance of being removed. My communities in Anstey, Birstall and Leicester Forest East, and many of the villages that border the city, fear being permanently outvoted by the urban-focused city electorate. They have watched... I'll give way.
I agree with every word my honourable friend says. He speaks absolute common sense. And you only need a best example, really, is to look at what's happened in Greater London, in a borough like Havering, which has always been Essex, being sucked into Greater London, paying huge sums of money to subsidise inner London areas and getting very little services as a result, but funding effectively inner London, having a mayor dictating to places like Romford about building high-rise blocks in the town centre, imposing things like ULEZ, and also his crazy woke political correctness, which I know most people in my constituency and in the honourable member's constituency would be completely opposed to.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh, and I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. And he makes a passionate point about his constituency. And I know he's been working on this issue for many years. And I do hope the Minister will take heed of what he's just said. And I know that he'll continue to champion those causes. My constituents have watched Leicester itself decline, while the county continues to deliver. The previous Conservative administration at County Hall presided over better education services, better roads, better social care at a fraction of the cost. Quite simply, my constituents do not want Leicester City or its mayor to drag them down. So is it any wonder, Ms McVeigh, that my constituents ask, who in their right mind would want to be part of an urban-focused Leicester City Council? Indeed, on the doorsteps, many of my constituents tell me that they moved to the county precisely to escape the decline of the city. Frankly, I could not agree more. I made the same decision myself just over a decade ago. I believe in devolution, but this expansion would leave county representatives outnumbered and overruled, while city priorities, such as the climate crisis, take precedent over the needs of areas like Mid Leicestershire. And finally, perhaps crucially, Ms McVeigh, any reorganisation must be preceded by a referendum, because it directly... I'll give way.
Thank you very much. I highlighted Surrey as being reorganised partly because of the debt of the former administration on Woking, which is completely not affordable for my local area. Surrey is concerned that they're going to have to pay that tab. How would a referendum work in that situation where Woking wants reorganisation and none of the surrounding areas does?
I think the Honourable Member for his intervention. I think that all those residents that would be impacted by any changes should be consulted for a referendum. So all those constituents that are part of a potential new authority should be consulted as part of that referendum. That's how I see it working. But of course there are different models, and the government could explain and could explore those different models in any approach that he was to introduce. As I was saying, any reorganisation must be preceded by a referendum because it directly determines local priorities and how much council tax our constituents will pay. If the boundaries are redrawn and my constituents are absorbed into a city council area, I believe they will face higher taxes for poorer services. Why on earth should we say to my constituents in villages like Birstall, Anstey or Firkeston, who are already dealing with the highest tax burden in a generation, that they will pay more for less and without a say? So conclude, at a time when trust in politics, trust in this place is at an all-time low, what better way for the government to show that it is listening than by letting ordinary people, the people who are impacted by such reorganisations, have the final say on how their local services are delivered and should have the final decision on how these are implemented.
I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called to speak in the debate. Also that interventions should be short, and we'll be coming to the front bench just before 3:30. The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of referendums on local government reorganisation. Jack Abbott.
Thank you very much, Mr McVeigh. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I thank the honourable member for Mid-Leicestershire for securing this debate. It's always right that this House has the opportunity to discuss how local government works and how it can work better, and of course how we ensure it delivers for the people we represent. And while I do not personally believe that referendums are necessarily desirable in the context of this local government reorganisations for reasons I'll come on to shortly, I do believe there's real values in debating these issues openly and transparently. Local government reorganisation is complex, consequential and long-lasting, and therefore it deserves serious consideration. And I would say to the honourable member that it's true, in fact, the previous Conservative government did conduct a round of referendums in 2012 with the coalition government across a huge swathe of our major cities. The issue, though, is that every city, bar one, said no when they were asked whether they would like a mayor. But of course, only a few years later, they got one anyway, and of course the government didn't seek to repeat that exercise. So these referendums that the Conservative Party did, which were little more in truth than lip service. And I think most people around here, the table here will think that mayoralties in the main, with honourable exceptions, have been a successful endeavour. They give power and they give autonomy to the places that have been often forgotten about in the past. And of course there were many places in recent years which underwent local government reorganisation with no referendum at all. And I think it's worth mentioning a little bit of an elephant in the room when it comes to the postponement of elections by a year in some places, like Suffolk, where I represent, until all-out elections in 2027 and mayoralties in 2028. But I think the party opposite's newfound aversion to postponing elections is quite remarkable, not least because, as local government minister, Kemi Badenoch herself, the leader of the opposition herself, postponed elections in Cumbria. Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister and former leader of the Conservative Party, also made the decision to postpone all-out district elections before reorganisation in Buckinghamshire in 2019, while local government minister. And Robert Jenrick, remember him, the latest recruit to reform. Honourable Member, thank you for the correction from a sedentary position. Whilst Secretary of State for Local Government, when talking about postponements in places like Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Somerset, said, elections in certain circumstances risk confusing voters and would be hard to justify where members could be elected to serve shortened terms. So it's an interesting volte-face for both Reform and the Conservative Party. So that's the last Conservative leader, the current Tory Conservative leader, and the one who up until last week was agitating to be the next one. So I will take a pinch of salt when it comes to the Conservatives' newfound desire for referendums or indeed postponements, not least because one particular referendum was arguably the start of a psychodrama that continues to develop them nearly a decade later. And indeed, we did have a referendum in 2024. We had a general election. Local government reorganisation was a clear and explicit part of our government's manifesto. And now I know that under the party opposite, delivering on manifesto commitments fell out of fashion. At best, they were little more than vibes by the end. But we were elected on a mandate of change, and that mandate including rebuilding and reforming local government as the foundation for meaningful devolution. The British people endorsed that programme at the ballot box, and that is our responsibility to deliver it. I'd be happy to.
He says that the electorate endorsed that at the ballot box. I wondered if you might show a little contrition in acknowledging that they got less than 50% of the vote. So trying to make out it was a glowing endorsement at that general election for this government and this manifesto commitment is perhaps putting a bit of a shine on it.
Well, look, I mean, we're sitting here with a parliamentary party sitting of over 400 MPs. That is an overwhelming mandate under our electoral system that we've been operating under for centuries. So on that basis, I think the party opposite can probably reflect on that if we're talking about numbers. I'd be more than happy to. Thank you.
I wonder if the honourable member for Ipswich will tell us if it was also in the Labour manifesto to abolish local council elections.
As I've already laid out in my speech, the honourable gentleman will know when he was a member of the previous party that actually postponing elections undergoing local government reorganisation happened a number of times. I personally wasn't here, so I can't remember if the honourable gentleman spoke out against his government at the time for doing so. As I say, there was a number of local government ministers that made a number of decisions to postpone those elections, and so I presume at the time he fully endorsed those, unless I'm happy to say if you'd like to correct the record on that point. No, thank you. So we were elected on a mandate of change, and that mandate included rebuilding and reforming local government as the foundation for meaningful devolution. The British people endorsed that programme at the ballot box, and so it is our responsibility to deliver it. And so our government is embarking on the biggest transformation of local government in a generation, and this isn't change for change's sake, but change because the status quo is failing far too many communities for far too long. And for decades, I'd be happy to.
I really do appreciate the honourable gentleman giving way and being so generous with his time. He talks about change, but what we're seeing is the continuation of the same local government reorganisation we saw under the last government, with the same rolling out of the same moralities as well. So this isn't so much change as it is a continuity of plans which are already in place, unless he wants to sort of give us anything new that I'm not already aware of.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his information. I'm afraid he's slightly mistaken. I take my own patch in Suffolk, for instance. Actually, what was proposed in terms of devolution under the previous government was handing a few more powers for a tiny bit extra money. Actually, what we're proposing here is unitarisation of places like Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk as well, plus a mayoral candidate for the elections in 2028 as well. So actually what we're seeing is far more radical, far more significant. In fact, for my part of the world, it's the most significant change in local government for over 50 years. So it is a big step change to what was being proposed under the previous Conservative government. So, as I was saying, for decades, power has been hoarded in Westminster and Whitehall, and while local councils have been stripped of capacity, fragmented in structure, and of course, been left struggling to meet rising demands after being hollowed out in terms of their funding. And that nowhere is that failure clearer than in my home county of Suffolk. In a past life, I was a county councillor, and don't believe me, I don't believe that the current status quo is working. I don't think many people living locally do either. And while I accept that is due to severe hollowing out of funding over 15 years, clearly a do-nothing approach is not an option for us either. And these sorts of issues, potholes left unrepaired, special education needs provision in crisis, children and families passed from pillar to post, adult social care under unbearable strain. These aren't abstract problems, they affect people's lives daily, their dignity and their trust in local democracy too. So the truth is that the current system is not working. We did need to do something radical. And as I said, that a do-nothing approach is not a neutral option. It's a decision to not change how local government is structured and empowered, and we are simply condemning communities like mine to more of the same. And that is why the government is opting to devolve and not dictate. Through the English Devolution Bill, we are rebuilding local government so as the strength, scale and capability to deliver. We hear chortling on the other side, but the Conservative County Councils, Suffolk County Council requested this process. They've consulted with the public as well. People were able to put their views for. We've had a county council who have put forward a single unitary option, and all the district and borough councils have put a 3 unitary option. So there's been a significant amount of consultation at local level. Parties of all stripes, although they may disagree on which outcome they would like to see, have all engaged incredibly constructively in this process on the whole. But we are looking to transfer power out of Westminster into communities and give local leaders the tools to drive growth, create jobs and improve living standards. So this is about rebalancing decades-old divides. As I said, we haven't seen this sort of reorganisation in my part of the world for over 50 years. I'd be more than happy to.
For giving way. And he's making a very powerful speech for an area of the country that is still two-tier. But having been a representative in a unitary council for a number of years now and lived in one for a number of years, I think it's worth just putting on the record that being part of a unitary authority doesn't mean that potholes are perfect, and it doesn't mean that send provision is perfect. And I appreciate that's probably not what he's implying, but anybody listening to this speech debate today could be mistaken for believing that unification is the kind of silver bullet. So would he agree with me that actually we need to be realistic about that?
Absolutely. I'd agree wholeheartedly that unitarisation or local government reorganisation alone is a magic bullet. Of course it's not. It also, those things you describe are due to severe underfunding. Pothole funding, road maintenance funding fell to around about £17 million a year, down from 20 million, although it crept up with putting far more money into that. We saw bus services shredded under the last 15 years. We've now got the biggest upgrade to bus services since 1998. So yes, of course, some of these things will help. I believe unitarisation in part will help deliver better public services, give far greater and a single point of accountability for voters as well. But it also comes down to leadership, culture and, of course, investment as well. So in Suffolk, there is a credible, detailed and ambitious alternative to the status quo. In my opinion, the proposal for a 3 unitary council put forward by all the district borough councils of Ipswich, Mid Suffolk, Baber, East Suffolk and West Suffolk clearly shows that this isn't a partisan project. This is a proposal that's put forward by politicians of all stripes. And it's a collaborative effort across political parties, grounded in evidence and focus on outcomes. I believe it would be simpler for residents, single point of contact, as I mentioned earlier, and they'd be more accountable and ending the confusion of who is responsible for what. I think anyone who's knocked on doors, you'll hear from residents say, I don't care who it is, I just want the council to fix it. And I think this is a sentiment that is shared quite rightly. But I also believe... Yes,
like all of us, we knock on doors and we talk to our constituents, and the thing they're really unhappy about in all councils is the fact that councils are just not operating effectively and getting the true local jobs done in their local communities. But the more remote you make the system, the bigger the council area is, I think the less effective it's going to be. Does he see that point about smaller towns and villages and boroughs losing their identity and losing local control because it goes to some big bureaucracy somewhere else a long way away from where they are?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and he makes a valid point. I think there is a balancing act to be made where we've got to make sure we've got the size and scales of councils where we can deliver public services efficiently, but also that are rooted in their local communities. That is personally why I'm backing a 3 unitary proposal over a single unitary proposal that the Conservatives at Suffolk County Council are proposing. And also it's worth mentioning that as part of this local government reorganisation as well, places like Ipswich, which would, in my view, hopefully turn into a greater Ipswich authority, would still need to retain a town council, and the parish council element as well would be really strong. I used to be a parish councillor. I recognise the value and the importance of those communities and having that very local representation as well as part of all of this too. Crucially, and this, funny enough, leads me directly onto this point, it strikes the right balance, big enough to deliver, but local enough to care. So Greater Ipswich Council, alongside a strong East and West Suffolk authority, will allow each area to play to its natural economic strengths, make faster decisions and champion their communities with strong local voices. I would have to mention at this point in time that while I think on the whole it's been a constructive debate in my part of the world, the conduct at times of the County Council has been deeply disappointing. Rather than making a positive case of their own proposal, they have repeatedly resorted to misleading and aggressive tactics. Nearly £50,000 of taxpayers' money has been reportedly spent on social media advertising for their own single campaign, with further tens of thousands earmarked for a so-called Alice in Wonderland leaflets, which seeks to ridicule all alternative proposals. And that is not engagement in my point of view, it's propaganda. And I would urge the Minister and the Department to look carefully at this. And I think for voters and residents in my area, at a time when potholes do go unfilled and children with special education needs are being failed by that same county council, residents, I think, are entitled to ask why public money is being spent on spin rather than services. And to be honest with you, this behaviour betrays a lack of confidence in their own case and shows a disregard for local people. So local government reorganisation must be about the future. It's not just about tomorrow, it's about the next 30, 40, 50 years, and it cannot certainly be about the preservation of power, status or the status quo. It must be about improving services, strengthening accountability and restoring trust. And this government has set the direction. We were elected on a mandate of change and we were delivering on it. But devolution is fundamentally about people, about ensuring communities like Ipswich and Suffolk have the resources, powers and trust to determine their own futures. And that is why referendums are not needed to delay or derail this progress. What we do need is leadership, honesty and the courage to build a system that finally works for the people it serves. Thank you.
Damien Hines.
Thank you very much, Ms McVeigh, and it's a great pleasure to see you presiding over these proceedings today. And I congratulate my honourable friend from Mid Leicestershire for securing this important debate. And it is very good for us to have an opportunity to discuss these issues openly like this. It's a great pleasure also to follow the honourable gentleman from Ipswich. I mean, he made a lot of the fact that there are hundreds of Labour MPs and the great mandate that this has given this government. Ms McVeigh, I have to say I do find it vexing that with a majority as large as this incoming government has, that they should choose as priorities things like digital ID, attacking jury trial, taking away school freedoms, trying to ban vaping in pub gardens and trying to ban trail hunting and a costly reorganisation of local government. Now, I should say I am relatively agnostic when it comes to the structure of local government. You hear some people say, I'm in favour of unitaries, I'm in favour of two-tier. I just find that a little bit of a peculiar position. I think you can give a decent argument in favour of almost any structure of local government, but the one thing I dislike is the upheaval when you are changing. Now, sometimes there is a good argument for change, and sometimes you must do it, but you should never pretend that there is no cost that comes with that change. There is financial cost in terms of reorganisation, what happens to buildings and all sorts of other things, and there is also effectiveness cost when any organisation is in a state of flux. Now, in the case of Hampshire, we'll be moving in this plan from a two-tier system to a single tier of unitaries, and there will be some economies of scale that come with that, some benefits that come with that. For example, on bin collection, you'll be doing it on a bigger scale. You should be able to get it at a lower unit cost. There will also be diseconomies in those services which are moving from the county level to the smaller level. So, for example, on adult social care, on aspects of children's social care, and so on. And frankly, we don't know, unless the Honourable Lady is, Right Honourable Lady is able to intervene to tell me. We don't know what the net effect will be. I've put down some written questions to ask what the government's assumption is that the net effect will be, and we don't have an answer to that. If there is a net benefit from the mixture of these economies, these diseconomies, and these costs of transition, I guarantee you it will not come in year one. All of these plans always end up being like a classic hockey stick sales projection, that of course things are going to get better, but we have to invest first in order to make that happen, so the curve goes down before it goes up. And I'm afraid with a lot of sales projections, it turns out that years 1 to 3 turn out to be accurate predictions, and the out years much less so. There are big choices to be made in reorganising to unitaries. This was alluded to a moment ago about in the context of Surrey and also in the context of Suffolk, in terms of the number of different unitaries you have in a particular area. And this makes a very practical, can make a very practical difference to residents. So big cost items are going to move from the county level, the upper tier, into these unitaries. So the two biggest costs, everybody knows, are adult social care and children's high need, the high needs block, and children's social care in education. They're going to go into the unitaries, and so if you're in a current district, which other areas you go in with would make an enormous difference. You need, because to fund all that expenditure, you are going to need income. So you are going to need to have business rates income. It will also matter a lot what the age structure is overall in the area, in the broader footprint of the area, because, of course, people of working age are net contributors. If you are retired or you're a child, you need that cash support. There's also the question of housing, and my honourable friend, I think, very accurately and succinctly put this. There is a lot of controversy about the current targets of housing for rural areas, which have gone up under this new government by an average of 71% in new areas and by 100% in an area like mine in East Hampshire. And I think there is a feeling among some people that perhaps this reorganisation and merging with other councils nearby, that will solve that problem. Because, oh, well, you won't have to put all this housing in the countryside. After all, it can go in the, as indeed it should, in brownfield sites and in already developed areas. I fear, Ms McVeigh, that the opposite may be the case. And, of course, we look to our councillors to understand, they do, understand the local areas they represent. The further and further away that decisions on things that really matter to local people are made, I think the less likely those decisions are to be ones that are good for those people. Why not?
Thanks to the honourable gentleman giveaway. The issue here is that already exists in what you're describing. In what the honourable gentleman is describing. We have a Suffolk County Council that represents the entire county. So the very argument you're making is actually already playing out at the moment, and there's already these conversations.
I'm grateful.
This has already happened. We've got rural councils making decisions about urban issues and vice versa. I don't think it's an either-or.
I'm grateful. I was talking about housing development and planning, which, of course, in Hampshire is made by East Hampshire District Council. It is not made by Hampshire County Council. There's also the question of identity. And, of course, counties are anciently formed areas and parishes are anciently formed areas. Districts quite often actually are not. Quite often they are modern constructs, not in every case, but in many cases, sometimes only dating back to 1974. And so you might say, well, then how does that affect people's sense of identity? Well, 1974 is now like half a century ago. And over time, they do start to require a particular... I know it makes us all feel a little depressed. I was born in 1969. And over time, they do acquire something more of an identity, and that's something we have to think about. The honourable gentleman from Ipswich was right when he said that local government reorganisation is complex, consequential and long-lasting. He also made a lot of having a mandate for change. Well, the Labour manifesto said loads of things about change. It said it on the front cover. It said change. It did not say that the change we are going to make is this precise type of local government reorganisation involving moving specifically to these unitary councils. And because it is complex, consequential and long-lasting, Ms McVeigh, it warrants a steady and a sober assessment of the implications for all of our residents.
Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend from Mid-Leicestershire for bringing this debate this afternoon. Now, I've made no secret of my views, unlike some members who've kept their views to themselves on what outcome they would like. I haven't, purely because I have a really deep conviction as somebody who grew up in the area of what feels right and what I know from my constituents is what they wish to see. But I am in an interesting position because I'm Plymouth born and bred. I am serving as a unitary city councillor, but I'm now an MP, and I'm now an MP for 40,000 residents in the city. But I do not believe that there is a need for that city to expand to deliver what it wants to deliver in the future. They're seeking seeking an arbitrary number, and I genuinely believe that it's for homes, land for homes, and for the increased council tax receipts that villages like Wembury and Yompton, Bickley, Walwell, Newton Ferrers and Nos Mayo would be providing with them. For them. Now, Devon is an interesting county, and it's a big county. It's actually the 4th largest county in the country, and I think people often forget that, but it's therefore very varied. And we have national landscapes. We've got Dartmoor National Park. We've got the largest naval base in Western Europe. We've got the Roman city of Exeter. We've got a huge amount of manufacturing, cultural gems like Saltram House in my constituency. But therefore, to take a plan which is entirely bottom heavy, the 3 cities coming together, the 2 cities and the large town coming together to say we'll look after ourselves, Gov, and the rest of the county can be left on its own, has understandably not landed that well with what's considered the rest of Devon, that I would gently like to point out is more than 50% of the population. Now, what we know about the county of Devon is that local identity matters hugely. And that, therefore, also means that the whole county needs to thrive as a result of local government reorganisation, not just see pockets of investment, pockets of development, and then everybody else. Along the lines of what my honourable friend here has said in terms of the age profile as well, we know that a lot of rural Devon is lots of older people, and a lot of the big cities are where the young and the the working population are. So that's why it's not surprising that 90% of those who completed surveys that I've conducted on the local government reorganisation plans are against the plans to subsume 13 parishes of my constituency into Plymouth City Council. It's why approximately 1,900 people signed a petition to say the same. And I have to say, I've heard from more of my residents than Plymouth City Council heard in their consultation. So although they have done the consultation they're supposed to, the figures that they shared with me were about half of those who have actually been in communication with me as the MP. However, the statistics that I've just presented that have come directly from my constituents currently have no formal voice in the LGR process. And when the 2 cities in Devon seem determined to secure their own future rather than be realistic about the economic viability of the rest of Devon, it's not hard to see why my constituents are unhappy. The LGR process, as it stands, has resulted in a bidding war and caused local councils, like some in Devon, to pick the best bits at the expense of the rest. Now, obviously, that is my opinion, but that is what I am watching happen across the county. So that is why I'm against the proposal that Plymouth and Exeter have, where they want to carve off the parishes that they think will get them to the magic number that they have in their head of around 300,000, but so what about what else happens? They literally call it the rest of Devon. Now, the government claims consultation is taking place, and I know that it is because I've been invited to take part in that. But it's not the mass inquiry that I think is what we're trying to do today. And I'm not necessarily of the view that it has to be a referendum, but I think something more formal would have been better. I believe that options for members of Parliament have been limited. I, for one, have been quite proactive. I've gone out to find out what my constituents think, and I'll be writing to you to share some of, to the Right Honourable Lady to share those views. But other local MPs have also been able to write to the Minister without having done that same surveying of their residents simply based on their own political views. Now, local councils, I'm afraid to say, are being taken at their own word. They may have carried out consultations, but they've been written up by the very people who want the change and where there is a huge vested interest to see it delivered. They're quite literally marking their own homework. Now, I know they've tried to be fair and they've spoken to as many people as they possibly can, but I'm still not happy that that should be taken with any greater weight than any of the information that members of Parliament are sharing. And indeed, one of the consultations that the Minister will have received from the Council implies that they've consulted with local MPs. Well, the only consultation was when I rang them to say, why have you said that you've consulted with me when I've not actually heard from you? So, you know, I think they've had an opportunity and it's not been taken properly, which has all just left quite a bad taste in the mouth of members of Parliament like me. Now, I think what we really need is a formal consultation of the communities affected, and in this case, that should be county-wide rather than just in the pockets that want to see their delivery done. You know, Devon is a huge county, and because there have been so many options on the table, it's been very difficult to get a coherent consultation. Each individual plan has done its own consultation, and none of those are looking at the big picture. They've all been looking at the view that that particular county, council or group has been proposing. Now, in a county like Devon, where the two key cities have Labour councils, majority Labour MPs, and a Labour government is calling out for this change, it's unsurprising that local people are doubtful of the proposals. And I appreciate that it's all being done in good faith, but that's how it is coming across at the moment. Now, local identity also also really matters where there is a connection between urban and rural. And I think this is what I'm trying to present this afternoon. I'm stuck in the middle, so to speak, between an urban city that ultimately needs money in its most deprived parts and then the country parishes that are deemed richer, but the whole southwest is poorer than large parts of the rest of the country. So we're comparing apples and pears rather than like for like. 67% of those surveyed identify as being from Devon. 10%, now I appreciate this wasn't a qualitative exercise, but 10% with Plymouth. And 18%, interestingly, typically named their small town or village as where they're from. Now I appreciate that may not change, but actually to start having your rubbish collected and your services provided by the big city down the road for a lot of these rural constituencies, rural villages, is deeply concerning. So imposing a top-down decision on communities like mine has, as I've mentioned, gone down very badly. So in the absence of a referendum, I would call on the Minister to weigh heavily the evidence from MPs like myself where they can show community engagement amongst their own constituencies. And I can only say that hindsight is a wonderful thing, and perhaps the department could have encouraged independent consultation rather than each of those groups creating their own plan, doing their own consultation, because I genuinely do think they've gone and written up the answers that they want to portray, because what I have heard is certainly not what I've had presented back to me by the councils. Now, regardless of this, I urge her to look at Devon as a whole, as a county that has so much to offer, but that if it's left to a cities and the rest of Devon, it's not necessarily going to be in the economic, in the most greatest interest of that county, and to listen to the views of everybody, not just those from those large cities, which, as I've said, make up less than half of the county's population. Now, if I may, just to finish, I've got one further question for the Minister as well. We've heard lots of conversation this afternoon about the different services that can be provided, the different councils, and what the Honourable Member from Ipswich mentioned precepts, I think. Now, one of the confusing things, I think, that isn't necessarily being talked about is that as this change happens, we're actually not looking at a level playing field on council tax. In Plymouth at the moment, you just pay council tax to the unitary authority, but my district council get money, the parish gets money, the county council gets money, and it's my understanding that those precepts will remain for the parts of a unitary that are not in the city, and that therefore we're actually going to end up with parts of my constituency paying more council tax than others. And interestingly, where there's an offer of creating town councils in new bits, which one of the communities in my constituency, some of the independent councillors there are in pushing for, to create a town council of Plimpton, I don't think constituents are clear whether or not that means that their council tax could go up to pay for that new town council or the parish council. So I would just be grateful for some clarity on that if the Minister would be so kind, just to make it ultra clear what we're actually talking about on the ground here. Thank you.
Andrew Rosendale.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh, and it's a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship. And I would, of course, like to congratulate my friend, the member for Mid-Leicestershire, on securing this timely debate this afternoon. And for me to listen about the passion that colleagues have for their own towns and villages and counties. We've heard about Leicestershire, Hampshire, Suffolk, and now Devon, all wonderful, great English counties. I think that it shows that whatever party we belong to, we care about the communities that we come from. We want the best local government structure that actually works for local people, delivers the services, but it's also about identity. And for me, as a proud Essex MP, being stuck in this artificial creation called Greater London has never been good. And so radical reform of local government is needed and needs to be as local as possible. True democracy is at local level, not in some bureaucratic organisation in a city. It's truly local, truly to villages and communities, and that's where it should be. We should all be working to achieve that and make it as democratic as possible. But, Ms McVeigh, I have to say that on behalf of local people, I believe the length and breadth of England, I would like to add my voice to the chorus of outrage against this Labour government's decision to delay an ever-increasing number of local government elections under the guise of restructuring. This is just an excuse not to hold elections. It's nothing less than a blatant attempt to hide themselves from the scrutiny of the ballot box, silencing the voices of millions of voters on the local issues that matter most to daily lives. And so be in no doubt that I, alongside my new party, Reform UK, colleagues here in Parliament, we totally oppose the ditching of democracy in this way. Due to be heard this week, Reform UK have launched a legal challenge, including a judicial review. We are clear that democracy delayed is democracy denied, and the Labour government is running from the fight of their lives in the upcoming elections on the 7th of May. And there is no way that the British people will let them off the hook. They may delay the elections, but they're just delaying their own defeat and demise. The British people will not forget that it's Labour that have abolished democracy in whole swathes of the country on the 7th of May. And so, Ms McVeigh, history tells us that only dictators cancel elections. Yet, shockingly, 30 local authority leaders have written to the Secretary of State requesting that local democracy be denied and their positions secured for another period without any election. I certainly will, yes.
As mentioned earlier, and the Honourable Member didn't correct me, did the Honourable Member have an issue when his former leader as local government minister delayed elections? Or either your current former leader, or the one before, and the Honourable Member's recent colleague, the Honourable Member for Newark, when he was Secretary of State for local government and also postponed elections. Did you speak out at the time? Do you akin them to dictatorships, those individuals as well?
So I think there's always a legitimate case to have a short delay when there is a serious purpose for doing so. And I remember when Mrs Thatcher abolished the Greater London Council. What a glorious day that was. We didn't have elections for the GLC and they extended it by one more year. So in circumstances like that, one more year, there are legitimate reasons for doing that. But we're talking now about up to 3 years. So this is unacceptable. This is completely beyond what is reasonable or necessary to get everything organised, ready for any local government restructure. Now, I'm not going to give away because I know the Honourable Member is going to say, but in my borough there were no delays and no restructuring for many years. So it hasn't affected my area. So I haven't spoken about other areas of delay in elections. That's for other people, other members to have done during those restructurings. I would love, Ms McVeigh, to see local government restructured in the Greater London area. I've been calling for this for many years, but sadly my former party refused to even countenance anything. When Tony Blair recreated the GLC under the guise of the GLA and this elected Mayor of London, which nobody really wants and it's very costly, we had that opportunity in 14 years to do something about this. And my friend, the member for Orpington, I know, has concerns as well about the way the Mayor of London and the GLA has operated. And he will be replying from the front bench later. And I'll be interested to hear if a future government that the Conservatives are part of, that they're going to be radical this time, actually do something about the local government artificial structure we have imposed on us in the Greater London area. Yes, of course.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and he's absolutely right to highlight a democratic deficit. West Sussex County Council, which is Conservative-led, have chosen to delay their elections for another year, which means that the county councillors will end up serving a 7-year term without seeking a democratic mandate since 2021. But does he share my concern that the constituents of Romford didn't elect a Reform MP?
So at the general election, which we need as soon as possible, we will see how many Reform MPs are elected. So I'm happy to have an election. I am happy to see an election as soon as we can possibly have one, because this country needs change. We've been stuck in a rut for years, and the British people have had enough. And so, yes, let's have an election. Let's have a general election. Let's get rid of this disastrous government, and let's see our country put in a better place. So going back to the original point, so most of the boroughs that are delaying their elections are Labour, but the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, they don't get off the hook scot-free, I have to say. Both parties have also requested cancellations. So, as it stands, over 600 council seats will not be contested later this year, meaning that almost 4 million people will be denied the chance to elect their local councillor representatives. Shameful, Ms McVeigh, it really is. It's unnecessary and wrong, and this policy should be changed. This is nothing short of a scandal, and the British people deserve better. They deserve a say about who runs their local councils. And that is why Reform UK supports serious consultations on local government reorganisation and ultimately referendums on that reorganisation. Local voices cannot be silenced, and we will fight to ensure that they are heard. Although bringing a short-term advantage to the Labour Party, blocking elections harms local people. Take, for example, in my borough of Havering, in year 2000, London government was reorganised, as I've already referred to, and it's not disorganised in, it was reorganised in not a dissimilar manner to this reorganisation taking place across the country today. Our area had the administrative title imposed on us in the 1960s of the London Borough of Havering. And you come to Havering, I think everybody knows they're Essex. We don't need to be told we're suddenly part of London when we've been 1.5 millennia under Essex, and suddenly a bureaucracy imposes a new title on us. And now we're under the thumb of this elected mayor and the Greater London Assembly. So please, can we have a referendum on whether to stay part of that particular regional government structure? Because Havering is not London, and we do not want to have our local government controlled by a London mayor, particularly the current one. And I think most of my constituents would like to see us get out. We want to connect with our Essex roots, both culturally and administratively. The people of Havering deserve a referendum whether they want to continue to be dominated by a political mayor. It must be their decision whether we remain part of that, and I believe it's time to let local constituents in Romford and throughout the borough of Havering have the choice to decide whether we want to be under a Mayor of London or whether we can regain our independence and our local identity back. At one point, if elections go ahead, the department, the ministry said that at one point that if all elections go ahead, there has to be strong evidence-based and justification for such a temporary delay. And these words, I think, are now haunting the Labour Party. I firmly believe that local and regional government is in dire need of reform, not only in my borough of Havering, but across the country. However, the answer cannot be less engagement with local people, but must be the opposite of that, giving local people a genuine say about the structure of their local councils. There should be thorough consultations, crystal clear explanations and referendums in local areas so that the decision is made by local people and not by central government and by central government bureaucrats making decisions over and above the heads of what local people truly want. The government's current excuses are simply that. In fact, it is worse. The reality is that this is a political stitch-up to keep local authorities under Labour control, which I have to say, speaking to people in my constituency, it's the last thing they want, to see Labour running their local council, having experienced a Labour government and a Labour Mayor of London. They are running from the polls and taking democracy with them, Ms McVeigh, and they should change this policy quickly. However, there is still time for the government to make its favourite U-turn. We've seen a lot of those recently, so let's see another one on this issue. Local government needs fundamental reform, but the government must consult people more broadly, respect democracy and allow elections to go ahead as planned. Anything else is unacceptable to local people across this country, regardless of their political affiliations, but Reform UK will fight this every step of the way. And if I could just end, Miss McVeigh, by commending my honourable friend for East Hampshire, who actually made a very good point about the identity of the historic counties. And another issue that I've fought for many, many years, where the historic counties and the ceremonial counties should be combined so that we all have one county identity rather than the muddle that we have at the moment of ceremonial counties, administrative counties and historic counties. 3 definitions of counties is a nonsense. And with this local government reorganisation, it does mean we should go back to the simple concept of county being a geographical and historical area that we can all feel part of because it's our history and it's our identity. Again, my borough should always have been under the ceremonial county of Essex. There's lots of other anomalies across the country. I know there are in Leicestershire and other parts of the country where these anomalies exist. So perhaps the Minister could take this one back at least so that we can have one county identity, which I think we could celebrate then across the country. Yes, of course.
I want to thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He does seem to have an identity focus, whether that's geographically or party political. But in my area of Woking, my constituents are much more concerned about potholes, the appalling child safety issue of County Council. Don't you think that should be a primary focus, not this issue?
Okay.
Vision. I think there's going to be 3 divisions. So if we want to come back in 35 minutes, this sitting is suspended, and then Andrew Rosendale can finish, and then we'll come to the front benches.
You can do both.
We start now?
Yeah. We'll run till 4:31.
Okay, 4:31. Andrew Rosendale.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. I was about to conclude my remarks as the bell went, but I would just finally say that if, as I hope, the Minister takes on board my point about the historic and ceremonial counties, that when that happens, the town halls in all the areas across our land will proudly fly the county flags from each town and county hall across England. And I know that will delight the honourable member for Chichester.
Bench, Steph Aquarone.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. I refer to my members' register of interests as a Norfolk County Councillor. I'd like to start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Mid-Leicestershire for securing this debate. Might I say how welcome that it is? Unlike the Norfolk Conservatives, he is a Conservative who thinks local government reorganisation requires more democracy, not less. The Labour government's novel approach of centralised devolution has put an enormous amount of strain on local authorities and caused a great deal of concern for my local residents. Norfolk is an area with unique characteristics, and we've all been well served in recent years by a Liberal Democrat-led district council who are well armed with the local knowledge to deliver for my constituents. We have the oldest population in the country, an economy which relies heavily on tourism and unique environmental factors, ranging from England's largest seal colony to the fastest eroding coastline in northern Western Europe. It beggars belief, therefore, that the government and Norfolk County Council's Conservatives think all of this could be easily handled by one local authority, which could also contend with the needs of a further 800,000 people and 1,700 square miles of county. The demand of Whitehall to arbitrarily find populations of 500,000 or more in these authorities just proves they haven't taken into reality the rural areas into account. Across the government's programme for local government reorganisation, there has been little consideration given to the specific needs and characteristics of both rural and coastal communities. Trying to bundle us with inland areas completely misunderstands the unique challenges and opportunities we face and risks worsening both. Furthermore, lumping our rural economy in to compete for funding and resources with an urban economic centre in Norwich and the surrounds risks pulling support for my local businesses and preventing us from unleashing the rural powerhouse that North Norfolk can be. That's why I and the vast majority of Norfolk's councils and MPs are supporting the future Norfolk proposal for 3 local authorities, and I strongly urge the Minister's Department to go ahead with it. I know these concerns and challenges will be felt across the country too, with Whitehall trying to dictate devolution and fundamentally misunderstanding much of how the world works outside SW1. It was deeply disappointing to see our mayoral election delayed for 2 further years by the government. Devolution is important in Norfolk and Suffolk to deliver a brighter future for both counties and seize upon the new powers and funding from government to drive forward change. We're left behind yet again. I'm also concerned for the financial black hole that this decision has left, not only in Norfolk but for many authorities with delayed elections. We've heard in the Chamber today the end of the Shared Prosperity Fund, which was set to coincide with the arrival of combined authority funding, allowing a smooth transition to continue funding important work by local authorities. However, the delay means we now see a cliff edge in September this year without support until we elect our mayors in May 2028. I wonder if the Minister could confirm what consideration the Department gave to this issue when they delayed our elections and what support she's going to provide to the stretched local authorities who've seen their balance sheets take yet another hit by the government. Of course.
On the point about combined authorities, in Sussex we've had our mayoralty election postponed until 2028, but the statutory instrument for creating combined authorities is still going to go ahead, and 2 elected representatives are going to form that combined authority from each local authority. That means we will have Conservative councillors who haven't had a democratic mandate since 2021 creating that combined authority. Does he agree with me that that's the reason they're holding on and delaying elections?
Well, I thank her for the intervention. I not only agree with her cynically, but I also think that is precisely why it is so important to have local elections, because not just for the time that will elapse or have elapsed, but for the very important nature of the decisions that those authorities are going to be making as part of the, as she points out, already legislated for local government reorganisation. I do want to give my thanks, however, to the Minister's colleague in the Lords, Baroness Taylor, who has made the picturesque journey all the way to Cromer to meet with local leaders in North Norfolk and also made time to meet with me to hear my concerns. Frustratingly, her considered approach does not seem to reflect across government. much of the devolution agenda, the left hand doesn't seem to know what the right hand is doing, adding new statutory responsibilities and costs onto councils, which must be delivered ahead of LGR, but with no certainty of how to ensure that capital investment and budgetary decisions are well suited to the setup in a couple of years' time. There are valid reasons and also drawbacks to having referendums around the programme of local government reorganisation, and I can understand sympathetic arguments towards both sides. But however, I do fully understand why, given the track record of Norfolk Conservatives, why my constituents are very worried by the blank cheque which was handed to them by the government to work on LGR and devolution. We saw our devolution delayed for years under the last government, while the Tories fought amongst themselves in Norfolk as to who would be coronated as the elected leader. Then our devolution was pulled entirely and then redrawn by the Labour government. Looking at how the Conservatives have run Norfolk since 2017, is it any wonder that my constituents might find the prospect of a referendum on their work appealing? They rode roughshod over the views of local residents, threatened to evict them with bailiffs, and acted like playground bullies because people in Sheringham dared to oppose their plans to bulldoze the bus shelter. They're denying children in Holt a long-promised primary school, despite being given the money by the government and the site being there to build on. They've allowed our transport system to crumble, spending millions on shiny new buses in Norwich rather than embarking on the much-needed rural transport overhaul that they should have. They are allowing the loss of vital convalescence care beds in Cromer and Cossey, worsening our healthcare crisis. They've driven our council to the brink of bankruptcy and are now having to go cap in hand to the government to get bailed out for blowing £50 million on the white elephant of the Norwich Western Link Road without an inch of road to show for it. And now, to the shock of nobody, they want to chicken out of elections for a second year running. They don't even have the guts to admit it, with the letter from the administration to the government being so unclear that they were asked to write it again and explain what they meant. Their assessment of whether our elections should be cancelled read like a letter from Vicky Pollard. Yeah, but no but. I made this point to the former Secretary of State that this Conservative administration in Norfolk is totally unfit to preside over Norfolk's future. I remain steadfast of this opinion, and failing Conservative administrations have been propped up by the government and allowed to do this across the country. Sorry, Madam Chair.
I just want to get you to get to your end of the sentence.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, I haven't.
Well, we'll leave it there. So, okay, division, so we'll have 15 minutes. No? Where do you argue in the time? It's 15 minutes, isn't it, for one division?
Usually, but I mean...
If you're back sooner, so we'll leg it back, then we will start sooner. Okay. See you ASAP. Yes. If you get back to the chamber quickly.
steadfast in the view and that failing Conservative administrations have been propped up by the government and allowed to do this across the country. It's simply not right. They should be facing the voters of their areas and be held accountable for their years of failure. While referendums are one of the means to get democratic legitimacy for local government reorganisation, I'd far prefer for that legitimacy to be sought by councillors facing their electorate. Whew, sorry, I was running fast on your instructions, Madam Chair. Local government reorganisation is too important for the government to get wrong. It cannot be done to people, it must be done with them. A more collaborative approach which fully considers local character and issues will be greatly welcomed by the government. Not doing any of this work at the expense of democratic legitimacy. I want to finish today by issuing a straightforward challenge to Norfolk Conservatives running scared of an election. We're ready to face the ballot box in May. Are you?
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Mid-Leicestershire, for bringing forward this important debate and congratulate him on his speech in which he made some excellent points. Mr McVeigh, local government holds a special place in our multi-layered and multifaceted democracy. It is democratically accountable, it is inherently bottom-up, and it is strongly community-minded. The average local authority delivers over 800 different services, providing key day-to-day functions that represent for most people the most noticeable interactions with political choices and democratic management. Whether it's bins, potholes, recycling, waste, libraries, adult social care or SEND services, for many people, the most obvious impact of their ballot box choices are those that are delivered at the local level, whether that's their parish, district or county council. I'm especially aware of this, having served as a local councillor myself in the London Borough of Bexley for 23 years and on a regional level as a London Assembly member for 13 years. It was a privilege to serve my constituents in those positions then, just as it is now as a Member of Parliament. And that's why I know that local government deserves support and respect. But unfortunately, it has become increasingly clear that the Labour government do not share this view. Now, along with my right honourable friend, the member for, forgive me for this, East Hampshire. I apologise to my honourable friend for that. I also noted the comments of the honourable gentleman, the member for Ipswich, when he pointed out the local government reorganisation is complex, consequential and long-lasting. Now, of course, he is completely correct. But my right honourable friend was also completely correct to say that there was nothing in the Labour Party manifesto that suggested a top-down nationwide structural reorganisation of all local councils. There was no mention of riding roughshod over the wishes of local people and local government, but that is exactly the course that they are pursuing in office. And we've heard throughout this debate from several honourable and one right honourable member about how the government's plans, which stretch far beyond the platform that they stood for at the last election, will impact their local area and their constituents. The government's programme of so-called devolution is already having sweeping impacts on councils and local people, not least, as we've seen for the second time in as many years, the likelihood of the cancellation of local elections across vast swathes of the country. And it is telling that of the 63 councils offered a chance to postpone elections by the government, nearly 3/4 of those are doing so are Labour-run or Labour majority. And following on from the spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, there are a further 4 local authorities where the Liberal Democrats have at least a share of power and one where they are in outright control. It is widely believed that Labour are denying democracy and running scared of voters by cancelling elections where they feel that they will get a pasting. Independent voices from academia to politics to the Electoral Commission are urging that these elections should go ahead. Just recently, the government told us that they would. As the Honourable Lady, the member for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, the chair of the MHCLG Select Committee, told the House on Monday, and I quote, "The Minister highlighted just before Christmas the fact that councils were asked to delay this after the Secretary of State repeatedly told our Select Committee that this would be going ahead. I am concerned that we are seeing a postponement yet again," and her argument was supported by the honourable gentleman, the member for Blackley and Middleton, who said, and again I quote, "As the former leader of a major council and a Labour MP, I find this completely embarrassing. A Labour government should not be taking the vote away from 3.7 million people. It is completely unprecedented for a Labour government to do that. There is clearly a vested interest from some councillors who may feel, looking at the opinion polls, that they may lose their seat." And he is surely correct in his assertion that this is what is behind the government's action. When 3.7 million people are denied the right to vote and the government's excuse is their own radically top-down and botched reorganisation of local government, it is no wonder that local people feel so ignored and insulted, as honourable members have made clear here today. And let me make clear again, the position of the Conservative Party is that these elections should go ahead. Our line has been completely clear and consistent on this. This mass suppression of democracy is perhaps the most egregious of the many negative outcomes of the government's bungled restructuring programme, but it is far from the only one. The greatest scandal comes in the government's approach to local councils as it seeks to carry out this unmandated position. It is vital that local councils, the elected representatives of local people and the communities in which they live, are heard throughout any process affecting the make-up, functions and form of their local democratic institutions. Instead, Labour's approach has been to dictate from Whitehall, forcing councils to sign up to a prescribed model of restructuring by imposing restructuring from the centre and leaving local people without a voice. We believe that true devolution requires clarity, accountability, sustainability and funding, elections and structure. But the government has offered none of these things. Whilst local referenda are expensive and non-binding, they do provide another collective voice that could feed into the debate about how people want to be represented, because it is local voices and local people that should be front and centre of any restructuring process. But sadly, given their current approach, even if there were local referenda, it appears likely that this government would simply ignore any view that did not correspond with its own. I'll give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, but I think there's a short-term memory issue here, because you say about referendum, well, actually the Conservative Party in 2012 had a whole heap of referendum about mayoralties and yet ignored all the outcomes from those. You say you now value local government, and that's incredibly welcome, but you hollowed out local government funding, and we've seen the cost of that. And also, your local when you were in power, when your party was in power, you suspended a number of elections to consider local government reorganisation, including from your now the leader of the opposition. So why suddenly has been this big volte-face in the last few weeks?
There were three local elections that were delayed in 2021, all of which were the result of local government reorganisations. They were delayed by 1 year, and there was a consultation that took place with the authorities affected in question in advance, and their views were taken on board. That is completely contrasted with what the Labour government is doing right now, where it is riding roughshod over the views of local people and cancelling elections for the second year running. Now, it is vital that communities get real empowerment they deserve, that taxpayers get the accountability that they pay for, and that new structures face proper scrutiny. And that is why, at the devolution bill's report stage and third reading, the opposition urged the government to look at this again and to accept amendments to ensure that the bill provided these key tenets. True to form, the government ignored these entreaties, so the opposition will continue to vote against the government in Parliament on their botched handling of this issue. If the government do not listen to local people, through whatever democratic means, we face a future for local government in which power is stripped from genuinely local authorities and people, parishes, town councils, neighbourhood groups and civic institutions, and centralised within geographically and democratically distant authorities instead. Whilst the government's track record speaks for itself, with rushed top-down reorganisations of local government and higher council tax burdens on residents, we believe that communities deserve a voice, not another expensive restructure that sidelines local priorities, moves decision-making further away from voters and inflates the costs for taxpayers. Whilst referenda, just like elections, could be ignored by a government that appears indifferent to the views of voters, we on this side of the House, made up of members of Parliament who believe in local voices, will continue to stand up for our local democratic institutions. Our electoral process should not be abused and bent to the will of any particular party for its own partisan benefit. Ministers should treat voters with respect instead of disdain, stop undermining our democratic system, and let the people of this country make their own decisions.
Minister.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh. It is a great pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I'd like to, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the excellent way with which you dealt with those interruptions that we had to deal with. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Mid Leicestershire for securing this important debate on local government reorganisation, and he made his case on behalf of his constituents very well, and I was listening to all that he said, as well as the members for Ipswich, East Hampshire, for South West Devon, for Romford, for North Norfolk, and of course for Orpington too. I've listened to the contributions that members have made. Many members have spoken up for their constituents, for the identity of their constituents, sees them for the culture and history of their constituencies, and it's important that we're able to do that in this House, and I congratulate all members for doing so, and I'll try as best I can to respond to some of the points raised as I go. I want to set out why we're reorganising local government and why it matters, because nearly a third of the population, which is about 20 million people, live in areas with two-tier local government. It splits functions and services across county and district councils. It slows down decisions as different councils try to agree, and it leads to fragmented public services and is confusing for citizens about who does what and who is responsible. Ms McVeigh, you'll know well, my constituency is in the Wirral, which was reorganised 6 years before I was born. And as the member for East Hampshire said, over time, the Wirral has come to have its own identity, but people still have identities from long before. Near to me, we have Cheshire, the county of Cheshire, that still has a strong identity, as you will know, Mr. McVeigh, and all of the places within it reorganised in 2009. And that Cheshire identity is still there, whilst the unitary authorities have grown in their different ways. So this is a continuing journey, as a number of members have said. But it's worth pointing out that in the honourable member's own area, who's led this debate, Leicestershire, the County Council has reported previously that 140,000 people called the wrong council when trying to get help and support. Now, I think we can all do better than that, and I want to work with local government to make that happen. We want to simplify local government, have single-tier unitary councils everywhere. That will make stronger local councils equipped to create the conditions for growth, improve public services and empower communities. As members have said, this is not some bureaucratic exercise. This is the biggest reform to local government in 50 years, and we want to make the most of that opportunity. Councils need to play a much clearer and stronger role in building our economy and making sure that everyone everywhere is part of our national growth story. Reorganisation can help do that. With one council in charge in each area, we'll see quicker decisions, grow our towns and cities and connect people to opportunity. The member for East Hampshire, I thought, made a very important contribution, and he asked what the net effect would be. It's different for each area, which makes it hard to forecast. But I also want to point out one other issue in response to the point that he's made, which is at the moment we are seeing spiking costs in particular areas, SEND, which he will know very well, also children's care, also temporary accommodation and homelessness. So I would be wary of making hard and fast conclusions because of the cost environment that we are in. I will have a number of occasions in which we will be discussing finance of local councils on the floor of the chamber in the months to come, but I would be happy to discuss these issues with him. Local government finance is complicated, but it's very important, and I thought he made a very strong intervention, which I noted. We want to see public services designed, particularly in these areas, for people's lives rather than in council silos, and bringing housing, public health and social care together under one roof means one council can see the full picture and spot problems early, and that's very important in the case of children's care, where we want to take a preventative approach and improve parenting support. Strong local government is the only way we can really tackle deprivation and poverty in the round. People living in neighbourhoods with high levels of deprivation especially deserve public services that will help them reach their full potential. And rather than multiple councils, I'll just finish my point, rather than multiple councils with confusing and inefficient structures, one council will take responsibility for making sure their area turns a corner. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. As you know, in Surrey, which is going through a process of reorganisation, 2 unitary authorities have been selected, which will each be more than 600,000 people in size. And there's a great concern that that is too big, will feel too remote, and with an added complication that with potentially £4.5 billion worth of debt in the new West Surrey, which is part of my constituency, or rather which my constituency is in, that many of my residents will end up paying a very, very high cost for debt that they didn't take any part in accumulating, which may directly affect the very public services that the Minister has just mentioned. So could I ask the Minister to speak directly to my residents and tell them why they should be paying for debt they didn't accrue and offer them reassurance that they will get the public services that they deserve?
Minister.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention and also for his time that he has spent engaging with me on these issues in relation to Surrey. He will know that the government took an unprecedented decision in relation to debt in Surrey, and we continue to be concerned about making sure that we can reach financial sustainability for all of the reasons that he described. So I would say to his residents that his MPs are engaging with the government and others on that subject. It's very serious and we'll continue to work together on it. In early February, we expect to launch a consultation on proposals for the remaining 14 areas, including the Honourable Gentleman's own in Leicestershire. And I know the Honourable Member is actively engaged in the discussion on reorganisation in Leicestershire and has been encouraging his constituents to have their say, as he describes, which I applaud and welcome. And I want to reassure him and other members who've participated in this debate that we take people's views very seriously. And as I said before, I was listening very carefully to the contributions that colleagues have made. Community engagement and neighbourhood empowerment are part of our judgment in looking at proposals for new councils. And I thank the Honourable Lady for South West Devon for the contribution that she made on this particular subject. New councils, like current councils, must listen to their communities and deliver genuine opportunities for neighbourhoods to shape the places that they live. And this is part of a whole other area of policy in the department, whether it's Pride in Place or the measures in the bill that's going through the House at the moment on community engagement. This part of it is very important. And I'd just also like to respond to the question that the Honourable Lady from South West Devon asked about precepts. Deciding that process will be a part of the reorganisation. And if she would like further details on that, I'd be happy to correspond with her. But it's part of the overall set of arrangements that we need to decide. Residents can make their views known through the upcoming consultations on local government reorganisation. The responses on the consultation will all be taken into account, and I hope that members will consider this process as part of the discussion that we are having. I want to bring my remarks to a close, and I do say to honourable members, thank you for engaging, and if there's issues that I have not picked up for reasons of time, I will respond to them individually in writing. All honourable members are most welcome in taking part of the discussions and part of the consultations on this reorganisation. In the end, this is about outcomes. We want to see our country grow economically and socially, and I thank honourable members for taking part in making this process work.
Peter Bedford to wind up.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh. I'd like to thank all honourable members from across the House for contributing to this debate. There's clearly a lot of passion from across the House about our local areas, our constituencies, and why local decision making matters so much to our residents. I would ask the Minister to reconsider the government's approach to this, in particular my point that local people should always have the final say on any structural changes in their areas. And that could be achieved by introducing local referenda. So I do, again, reiterate my point to the Minister and ask that the Government does reconsider its position on this. But I beg to move that this House has considered the potential merits of referendums on local government reorganisation.
Yeah. The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of referendums on local government reorganisation. As many of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We will